Welcome back to Busy Garden Life. Today I am in the kitchen. I have been making chicken soup. My pressure canner is still going, so if you kind of still hear it, that's what's in there. And I'm going to show you my beef stew recipe. We are going to can this as well. So I have already cut up my carrots, celery, and onions. They're all sitting right here ready to go. I have also chopped up or cubed up my chuck roast beef. All right, so you want to do a chuck eye steak, or roast, I should say, chuck roast, and get all of the fat and the bones out of it, and just cut it into like 1.5 inch cubes. All right, so the last few things I need to do are, I'm trying to get my garlic ready. I'm just peeling the garlic. I'm gonna do 5 cloves of garlic. We like a little extra garlic. You can do less if you want to. Actually, the original recipe that I use only calls for 3, so I'm adding a couple because we like it. So I just have to peel these, and then also I'm going to peel the potatoes, and we're going to chop up the potatoes. Now, the reason that I wanted to do this weekend is because I just harvested all of my carrots, celery, potatoes. I harvested garlic a little bit ago. So pretty much all of these ingredients are from the garden. The onions, I have a few from the garden, but they didn't do great, so I did have to buy some from the store in order to can this full recipe. But it's kind of nice. I'm going to use my own beef broth and chicken broth that I have canned in the past. So we're going to use those. So a lot of the ingredients that I'm using are stuff that, you know, I've grown or I have on hand that I've made. So it's nice to be able to use that. Now, when you are preparing all the vegetables, you want to make sure that you peel your carrots, wash them and peel them. You do not want any of the dirt because that's where the chance of botulism happens, right? So even though we're going to process it for a really long time, we still got to be very careful. Do not peel your carrots. Wash the celery really good before you chop it. And then we're going to do the same thing with the potatoes. We're going to make sure that we are chopping those or peeling those really well. So just peeling the last clove of garlic here. I have the pressure canner is kind of already getting warmed up there. So ideally, if you wanted to do your chicken soup and your beef stew at the same time, you absolutely could. So you can chop up all of your vegetables. The only difference is you're chopping extra potatoes and garlic for your beef stew, and you're only using carrots, celery, and onions for your chicken soup. So quite honestly, you could do them both together, and then when you process them in the canner, because they both take an hour and a half, you could process them together because we're only making 6 to 7 quarts total of both, but I wanted to break it up so that I could show you guys separately what I'm doing. So anyway, the canner is already going. That only has 1 more minute left, and we'll let it cool, and it'll be ready for the beef stew when that's done. I have my oven going with my quart jars at 200 degrees to keep them nice and warm. And then I'm just chopping. That's all ready. Cloves are ready, so we're just going to peel our potatoes next. I grabbed some fresh thyme from the garden, so I have that. Salt and pepper on hand. And we will be about ready to kind of put it all together and assemble it. So as I'm peeling the potatoes, I wanted to discuss a little bit about beef stew. So when you're canning beef stew, you do not put any of the thickening agents in it, all right? So we're just kind of doing a base of the beef stew. The flour, cornstarch, that gets added in as you're warming it up again. Sorry, the kids are a little stir crazy today. Need to get them outside. But you do not want to add any of those into the canner. Just like noodles for the chicken soup, we don't add the noodles while we can it or before we can it, we add them afterwards. So kind of the same concept there when you're making these recipes. Alexa, stop timer. All right, I'm gonna go shut that canner off so we can start letting it cool. Okay, the pressure canner's off. I finished peeling all the potatoes, so we're just gonna chop the potatoes up. We want them into nice cubes, 1-ish inch cubes, I would say. You don't want them too small because then they're just gonna get mushy in the stew. So we're just gonna chop these up. I peeled them and washed them, kind of rinsed them off again. So they are all ready to go. If there's any bad spots, you can kind of cut them out too as you're doing it. Okay. So I'm hoping this recipe will give us a good 3 to 4 quarts of stew. It's a 3.5-ish pound roast. Oh my goodness, it's loud and crazy in here today. Sorry about that. So I have a 3 to 4 pound roast that I used. Carrots, onions, and celery. I have 1.5-ish cups of each of them. I have 5 potatoes from the garden, medium size, 5 cloves of garlic, salt, pepper, the thyme, and then we're gonna get some oil and we are going to head over to the stove because we have so we have all of our ingredients ready. We are gonna head over to the stove because we are gonna start assembling it all. I'm just gonna grab the chicken broth and the beef broth from the refrigerator so that we can use that as well and get this going. Okay, so we are over at the stove and what we are going to do is we're gonna put a little bit of vegetable oil in the bottom of our pan. You can use a Dutch oven, a stock pot pan, but you want it to be big enough to hold everything, okay? So we're just gonna kind of warm up the vegetable. We're just gonna warm up the vegetable oil. Okay, so we got vegetable oil warming up in here. I'm gonna kind of move it around here a little bit. And then we're gonna put about half of the beef in first. Because it's so much, you wanna kind of spread it around. And then we're gonna sprinkle it generously with salt and pepper. I'll wash my hands real quickly. All right. Okay, so we got it nice and sprinkled there. We're going to let it cook, or not cook. We're not cooking it, we're browning it. We're just browning it on all sides. And then we're going to take it and put it in a little bowl and brown the rest of it so that we have it all nice and browned. You do not want to cook it all the way through. We're going to be warming it up with the vegetables and the stock, letting it simmer for a while so the meat will cook through at that point in time. You still want it nice and tender with that, so do not cook it all the way through. Just kind of let it brown on each side. Okay, so it's browned. There's still some pink areas on the outside, and that's okay. Like I said, it'll cook a little bit more. You want it nice and tender. So we're just going to put it on a plate here for now. And then we're going to brown our next batch. Pressure canner is still kind of coming down from the pressure, so we can't quite use that anyway. All right, spread it out and don't forget to salt and pepper this batch as well. Now, if you wanted to, you could add peas at the end of the simmering, some frozen peas or fresh peas at the end, kind of warm them up a little bit and can them. I like to add the peas when I'm warming it up. So when you're making the beef stew, you have to add your flour or your cornstarch. I usually add like a flour and tomato sauce or tomato paste together, and then kind of add the whole jar of stew and just kind of get it to be nice and thick, get it very stewy instead of soup, right? And then at the end, I'll put in a cup of frozen peas, a half a cup, whatever you want, of frozen peas. And that way I get peas in the soup as well, or in the stew as well. So it's a nice hearty meal. If you watched my chicken soup video, you'll note that my husband doesn't think that stews and soups are much of a meal. He likes it more as an appetizer with a whole nother meal on the side or something extra. It's not much for him. So I tend to use like the beef stew on days where he's working, and then my kids love it. So we can have a nice meal of the beef stew with some, fresh bread or rolls or something, and it's plenty for them. So I like to add as many vegetables in that as possible. That way we get a nice hearty meal out of it. So that's kind of how it goes for us. All right, so we're just gonna kind of let this brown a little bit. We're gonna take these out afterwards, and then we're gonna start on the vegetable part of it. Let's take the rest of this out here. And then we're gonna start on the veggies. It's nice. I mean, you do a lot of the cooking ahead of time, so it is a little bit more work up front as opposed to just throwing in a jar. I've seen, some canning recipes where they just kind of throw the meat in, the cooked meat, some veggies in, some chicken or some water or beef broth. I like to do it this way. I like to get it cooking a little bit because this is one of our favorite recipes that my kids just love to eat. So I have just turned it into something that I can can. All right, so I just added some more vegetable oil to the pot, and now I'm going to add mainly I'm going to start by adding the onions. Of course, some of the other veggies are going to get in there, but mainly the onions. We want to get those cooking. Kind of love them. So I like to cook the onions down a little bit more. The celery and carrots, I don't want them to be overly mushy. So I tend to add those kind of more towards the end when I'm letting it simmer for a half an hour. That way they don't get too mushy. So I'm gonna let the onions just kind of soften here for a couple minutes, and then we're gonna press in the garlic. I'm gonna season again. I'm gonna add some salt and pepper. Now you can always wait to season, you know, when you're cooking it and you're ready to use it, you can always season it more. But I also like doing as much as I can ahead of time. On the beef stew, the chicken soup, I don't do as much. Scrape up any brown bits from the meat. All right, that's looking pretty good. So we're gonna add in our garlic. You can mince this up, chop it up ahead of time if you want to. I'm just gonna use a garlic press. All right, so we got the garlic in there. And we're gonna add fresh thyme. You could chop it up if you wanted to, if you like it a little bit smaller. Just for the sake of ease, I just am adding it right in. I did about 3 sprigs. Recipe calls for actually 1 tablespoon of fresh, but I don't like that much thyme, so I did 3 sprigs of it. So maybe a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. All right, now that that's nice and fragrant, we're gonna start adding our chicken broth and our beef broth. And I still forgot to get it out of the refrigerator in the other one, so I'll be right back. All right, so you typically want like 1.5 cups. I'm gonna do 2 cups of each, beef broth and chicken. Actually, a little bit more chicken stock there. I like doing the half and half. So we're gonna kind of bring this up to temperature, kind of bring it up to simmer. And then we're gonna add the rest of our veggies and meat, as well as our potatoes. We can add more broth as needed to make sure that everything's all nice and covered. All right, starting to steam quite a bit, so we're going to go ahead and add everything else right into our pot. All of our veggies. All the meat with the extra juices. And our potatoes. Oops. All right, and you can see it's getting kind of thick there, so I'm going to add a little bit more broth. so that I can make sure that it's completely covering the meat. Use the rest of this chicken broth first. Yep, I'm just going to dump it all in because we're going to be simmering it anyway. There we go. So this will boil down a little bit since we're going to simmer it. So we're going to bring it to a boil, and then it's going to simmer for about a half an hour before we can it. Okay, you can see we've got a nice boil, so now we're just gonna reduce it to a simmer. We're gonna let it simmer, let the meat finish cooking, some of the veggies to soften up a little bit, the potatoes to soften. They'll cook a little bit more while we process them, but at least we can kind of get them going now. Kind of let some of that foam on the top die down as well. It'll be a nice thick stew. Look at all those yummy veggies. All right, I'll see you in a half an hour for canning. Okay, just pulled the jars out of the oven, and now we are going to fill them. It's been kind of simmering for about a half an hour or so. Now it doesn't look very beef stewy like. It looks more beef stew, or soup, I should say. But again, that's because you can't really add your thickening agent in order to can. So it'll thicken up when you make it. We want to leave 1 inch of head space. Make sure that liquid kind of fills it all the way in. There we go. So this one's not going to make a full one, but what I might do is actually, I'm just going to keep it out. Shh, shh, shh. Give me just a second. Give me just a second, all right? I'm going to go ahead and keep that one out, and my husband's working tonight, so we're just having leftovers. I'll keep that, and I'll eat it for dinner. I'll add a little bit of thickener and all right, our pressure canner should still be kind of nice and warm. It's still going, so we're gonna pop these in there. And these are kind of the same as chicken noodles or the chicken soup. You want to bring it up to 10 pounds of pressure, and once it gets to that 10 pounds of pressure, you're going to process it for 90 minutes or an hour and a half. So we're going to go ahead and, okay, Matthew, I got to put you down for a second so I can put the lid on, okay? We're going to close it up. Close it up nice and tight. There we go. I'm going to raise that temperature there so it comes to 10 pounds, and then an hour and a half. Here we go. Okay, it's been 90 minutes, and the pressure has already been down to 0. I've let it been sitting for a while, so we are going to go ahead and take our lid off. All right. I can still smell it. Take our hot jars out and set them on our towel. Make sure that you're setting the hot jars on a towel on your counter. You do not want to set them directly on your counter. All right, there you have it. We have 3 quarts of beef stew, and we did earlier 3 quarts of chicken soup. So we have got some nice hearty meals ready for the winter months. Check them out. All right, and that's it for this video. We will keep on harvesting our vegetables in the garden, and I will keep posting on how I preserve them and keep them in the pantry for the winter. And then stay tuned because school has started. We are getting ready to start doing some of our meal prepping and meal planning again. This time I'm going to try to mix it up in how we can plan things and put things in the freezer a little bit more, some chicken meals that are marinated, and some other things that we can meals that we can put in the freezer and have them pulled out and ready. And then we also continue with our canning, and we're going to try and use a lot more of our canning this year with the meals so that you can see how I actually use the stuff that I can throughout the winter. I don't necessarily can just anything. I can things that I know that we're going to need throughout the year and that my family uses. So subscribe to the page, and that way you can get all the notifications of all of our new preserving and, like I said, the meal planning and prepping that is going to take place here in the next couple months. We'll see you soon.